sun went down thousands of years ago, the world didn't just go quiet. It got dangerous. No streetlights, no locked doors, no phone flashlight to check what made that sound outside the cave. Just darkness and whatever lived in it. So what did our ancestors actually do once night fell? The answer might surprise you. For most of human history, night wasn't a time to relax. It was a time to survive. Early humans didn't have the luxury of scrolling through a screen or watching a show before bed. Once the light disappeared, so did their ability to see predators coming. Big cats, hyenas, and other nocturnal hunters were most active exactly when humans were most vulnerable. So the very first thing our ancestors did at night was something incredibly simple. They found shelter, and they stayed close together. Caves, rock overhangs, and later simple huts became nightly refuges. Anthropologists believe that early humans likely picked sleeping spots specifically for defensibility. A narrow cave entrance was easier to guard than an open field. Groups would huddle near the back of a cave, using the terrain itself as a wall against the outside world. Safety in numbers wasn't just a saying. It was survival strategy. And then there was fire. Fire changed everything about what night meant for early humans. Some researchers believe controlled fire use goes back at least 1 million years, though it became widespread much more recently. Once humans could reliably keep a flame burning through the night, darkness stopped being pure danger and started becoming something else. A shared space. Firelight pushed back the predators. Big cats and other nocturnal hunters are typically wary of flame, and the heat and light of a fire created a kind of invisible boundary around a camp. But fire didn't just protect people. It gave them something they'd never really had before. Extra hours in the day that weren't dominated by finding food or fleeing danger. And that extra time changed human behavior in a big way. This is where the story gets interesting. Some anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups whose lifestyles may echo ancient patterns, have noticed something unexpected. Daytime conversations among these groups tend to be practical. Talk about food, tools, disputes, work to be done. But nighttime conversation, gathered around a fire, shifts into something completely different. Stories, myths, gossip, jokes, the kind of talk that has nothing to do with survival tasks and everything to do with connection. Researchers who've studied groups like the Jew/Hoansi people of the Kalahari found that firelight storytelling sessions could stretch for hours. Elders would recount tales of ancestors, spirits, distant lands, and dramatic hunts. Children would listen wide-eyed, memorizing stories that would later be passed down to their own children. In a world without books, without writing, fireside storytelling was the internet, the library, and the classroom all wrapped into one nightly ritual. Some scientists believe this nightly storytelling tradition may have played an enormous role in shaping human culture and even human cognition. Stories carried more than entertainment. They carried survival knowledge, which berries were poisonous, which rivers flooded, which animals were dangerous, and how to handle conflicts within the group. A well-told story was memorable in a way that a simple instruction wasn't. Wrapped in character and drama, information stuck. Passed down for generations, this oral tradition likely preserved knowledge long before anyone thought to carve a symbol into stone. Fire also brought people physically closer. Unlike scattered daytime activities, hunting parties heading one direction, gatherers heading another, nighttime around the fire pulled everyone into a single circle. Anthropologists suggest this nightly gathering might have strengthened social bonds in ways daytime work never could. There's something different about looking someone in the eye by firelight, sharing food, laughing at the same joke, that builds trust and closeness. Some researchers argue this nightly bonding ritual may have helped hold entire communities together for tens of thousands of years. But night wasn't only about stories and safety. It was also, biologically speaking, a completely different experience than the one we have today. Without artificial light pollution, the night sky above ancient humans would have been staggering. A thick, glittering band of stars, the Milky Way clearly visible, more stars than most people alive today have ever seen in one glance. It's likely that early humans spent a fair amount of time simply looking up. Some researchers believe this nightly view of the stars may have inspired some of humanity's earliest attempts at tracking time. Long before written calendars, People may have used the moon's changing shape and the position of certain stars to mark the passing of seasons, useful for knowing when to expect migrations of animals, or when certain plants would be ready to harvest. The night sky wasn't just beautiful. It may have been one of humanity's first clocks. Sleep itself also looked different back then, and this is one of the more surprising parts of the story. Many historians and sleep researchers point to evidence that people in pre-industrial societies, and likely much further back than that, didn't always sleep in one continuous block the way most of us do today. Instead, some evidence suggests a pattern of what's sometimes called segmented sleep. A first sleep, followed by an hour or two of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, followed by a second sleep. During that middle-of-the-night waking period, historical records from later eras describe people getting up briefly to tend a fire, check on children, have quiet conversation, or even visit neighbors before returning to sleep. While direct evidence for this pattern in truly ancient prehistoric humans is harder to pin down, some researchers believe it's a plausible explanation for how humans slept before artificial lighting made a single, unbroken sleep block more common and more necessary for modern schedules. Not every night was calm around the fire, though. Night was also when danger felt closest, and ancient humans were keenly aware of it. Sounds carried differently in the dark. A snapping twig, a distant howl, or rustling in nearby brush could mean nothing, or it could mean a predator was testing the perimeter of the camp. Anthropologists believe that keeping watch, even informally, was likely a common nighttime practice. Someone might stay half awake, listening, ready to wake others if needed. This constant low-level vigilance may have shaped something deeper in the human psyche. Some researchers suggest that our modern fear of the dark, something most people experience at some point even in childhood, might be an evolutionary echo of a time when darkness genuinely was more dangerous. For hundreds of thousands of years, being cautious at night wasn't irrational. It was the difference between waking up the next morning or not. Night also had a spiritual dimension for many ancient cultures, and this is a thread that shows up again and again across completely unconnected societies. Darkness, fire, and the unknown combined to create fertile ground for early religious and supernatural belief. Some archaeologists believe nighttime rituals, dances, chants, symbolic gestures around the fire, may have been early forms of what would later become organized religious practice. The night, with its shadows and its silence, made the world feel larger and stranger than it did in daylight, and early humans responded to that feeling with ritual and myth. As human societies grew more complex, so did their nighttime routines. With the development of agriculture and permanent settlements, nights became slightly less about pure survival and slightly more about rest, family time, and community events. Villages might host gatherings, celebrations tied to harvests or seasonal changes, or communal meals that stretched into the evening hours. Night was still darker and more mysterious than anything we experience today, but it was slowly becoming something closer to what we'd recognize as downtime. Even so, for the vast majority of human history, artificial light remained scarce and precious. Oil lamps, torches, and later candles were expensive or time-consuming to maintain, which meant that for most people, night still meant limited activity once the fire burned low. Households likely wound down early, conversation quieted, and sleep, whether in one block or two, took up the majority of the dark hours. Looking back at all of this, what's striking is how much of what defines human culture may trace back to those nights around the fire. Storytelling, mythology, music, early astronomy, social bonding, even our instinctive caution in the dark. All of it may have roots in those long nighttime hours our ancestors spent huddled together, watching flames, watching stars, and watching each other. Today, artificial light means night rarely feels the way it once did. We can work, scroll, and socialize at any hour, and true darkness is something many people rarely experience at all. But in a strange way, some of those ancient nighttime habits still echo in modern life. We still gather around glowing screens instead of glowing fires. We still tell stories to unwind. We still, on some deep and ancient level, feel a little more alert, a little more alive to the unknown once the sun goes down. So the next time you're up late, maybe telling a story, maybe just staring at the stars, know that you're taking part in one of the oldest rituals our species has ever known. One that started tens of thousands of years ago around a small fire in the dark.